try to mix it up a little bit because it's fun. It's fun.
So you're right now at this second. You got to get up and play a gig. You like you said, it changes daily.
Yeah.
So what are you gonna grab? What do you grab tonight?
Depends on who it is and what I'm doing. I mean, if it was like, for instance, when I was playing with the Salty Dogs, that's kind of an old time blues, R&B, country type band, and so it's a bigger band. So you got drums and you got Dave Russell played keys and sax, and then we always usually had another guy that played steel and fiddle, and then bass player, and then me. And so you don't have to play that much in a big ensemble like that. So in a more than 3-piece thing, Les Paul Jr. works real good for that. You ride your volume, you can ride your tone, and working in a 3-piece, a Les Paul Jr., hats off to Leslie West, I don't find it that easy to play that guitar in a 3-piece setup. It's just, if you want to vary the tone, you got to turn the knobs and work it. And so, in Salty Dogs type gig, maybe a thin line telly, and I have this little setup where it's a Electro Harmonics 22 caliber. It's a 22 watt amp.
Yeah.
It's like a volume knob and a bright switch, and it's the size of a stomp box. And it's 22 watts, so I'll run that into this little Marshall mini cab. It's loaded with a Reverend all-tone 10-inch speaker. And then maybe on top of that, I'll have like this, solid-state Marshall from the 80s, made in England. It's a lead 20. It's a 10, I think it's a 10 or is it a 12? I don't know, but, run all those off of an ABY box, and so you kind of got the best of both worlds with a boost and some kind of other overdrive. And Rotovibe, Dunlop Rotovibe's always been a standby pedal for me. There's other stuff out there that does the same thing, maybe does it a little bit differently or whatever, but I like the variable speed on it. It's just, kind of a wah-wah style case, and it's variable speed. I really like that thing. And then, Crybaby, I've seen all those $300 wah pedals and stuff, and it's like, yeah, they are maybe a little bit higher quality components and a little bit more features, but sometimes, man, this shit doesn't need to be reinvented. It needs to stay simple. I crave simplicity.
I can dig that.
I lived through the 80s where people would wheel in
the rack gear.
Look like a refrigerator rack, and it was like, dude, at the end of the day, all you want to do is just plug into this Fender champ and turn it up to 10, Put that through a 412 or 212 or 410, and I just, you don't have to play that loud anymore,
You definitely don't. I can definitely agree with that. I am a gear fan, and everybody that knows me knows that. But I've found it as I've gotten older, the guys that were, you gotta have a Marshall, you gotta have Fender, you gotta have Gibson, you gotta have, a Strat, and I just don't find anything in them that I care too much for.
Yeah, I love the way other people sound on a Strat. I just, I never have really felt comfortable on a Strat. And it's like the middle pickup, I use a kind of a hybrid picking style where I use my pick and my middle finger and my third finger, and it just seems like I'm always getting caught on that middle pickup at least. And then I find that the volume knob is just in the wrong spot, so where you're hitting, you end up hitting with your pinky, and it, you turn it down, and you're not even knowing what's happening. So I love the way other people sound on a Strat. I've just never felt real comfortable with it. I like the contours of it. I like the weight of it. And you're right. The Les Paul's, it's a big instrument. There's, it's hard to get up there at the top. It's heavy. It's like playing a log.
Yeah. As I get older and try different things and get less biased about things, I like Kiesel and Carvin stuff, which is, especially the new stuff's all marketed towards metalhead guys, and which is not me by any stretch. Yeah. But damn it, that's, as far as I found anything, that's what I want to pick up. That's the stuff that feels right in my hands. It's what sounds best. And amp stuff, new Marshall stuff, there's something in the highs that just doesn't sound good to me.
Yeah. Well, it's...
I'd rather pick up a Black Star I've got a Black Star HT60 that I really like. I've got a Carvin Bel Air, admittedly, that Martin modified all the hell at this point. But,
Man, one of the coolest things I got was this, before Les passed away. Les was my friend that helped us in recording and various things, but he had started to hand wire one of those kits, and it's a 18-watt Marshall clone. It's a head.
Yeah, it's based off I've seen it. It's based off the treble middle bass circuitry, I believe.
Yeah, and each channel's only got a tone and a volume. And then the other one channel's got tremolo. And I'm just like, this is 18 watts, and it's hand-wired, and it's basically a copy of everything in that Marshall, and it's like, man, that thing sounds good, because I'm running off of ABY into both channels, and it's just really, really rich sounding, and so, I've gone through all the stuff, big amps, small amps, and all that, and honestly, the biggest sounds on tape are from the smallest amps. I don't think I'd buy another amp that was, more than 30 watts, probably. Unless I was playing, Texas Stadium or something like that. Then I'd go for a Wizard 200-watt head or something, But, in a big place like that, that turned up to 8 is not very loud. But in your bedroom, it's blow the windows out of it.
You mean you're not going to go out and buy the new 5-channel Marshall JVM?
It's way too complicated. I have a Mesa Boogie, and it's a great sounding amp. It's 3 channels. That's about 2 more than I need, and I'm a simple guy. I like simplicity, and I just feel like some of the stuff, they make it too complicated. It doesn't need to be that complicated,
I have found that I use complicated stuff in a really stupid, simple manner. Like, people tell me, it's like, but you could do so much more with this, and I'm like, but I'm good.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. If I was in like I saw this band one time when I was a kid. We went to Vance Air Force Base, and it was like the band. They're in the Air Force, but they're in this band that goes around and plays different functions and stuff. It was quite impressive. They had female singers doing everything from Miami Sound Machine, just a variety of music all across the board. Now, okay, so a guitar player needs to be able to cover all those sounds, and so. In a situation like that, yeah, you got to have a little bit more complicated setup, access to different effects. That's where all these modeling people really, excel, is bands like that. But I don't really think I need to make it that complicated. If it's inoperable and I can't see it and there's too many knobs, I just crave simplicity. Thankfully, what I do doesn't call for, 16 different delays and all this other stuff. It's just kind of, I feel, takes away, takes away the focus, really. It's fun to fool with, but it shouldn't be like, forefront. The song should be the forefront. This should be the icing.
I use that Black Star. It's 3-channel amp.
Yeah.
But I use it in the stupidest possible way. Clean channel, overdrive channel, and the other overdrive is set exactly the same, but louder.
Yeah, so like a boost. It's for solos.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I use it for.
Yeah.
So I don't have to, like, we played Bands Against Suicide 2 weeks ago. Bogner Alchemist has,
Nice.
yeah, dude. Got lucky on that one. That was a steal for sure.
Sweet.
Again, same thing. Just, so I didn't have to take my pedal board. Because we're going to do a 45-minute set, and I don't need wah for that song. I don't need delay, and the amp has delay built into it.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it's got reverb built into it. Bam! I have to take a foot switch.
Yeah.
Which is totally not how they intended you to use this,
Mm-hmm.
but it's what worked for me. And actually, looking back, that's the best show we've ever played, because there was less stuff at my feet that I had to focus on. I just have solo on, solo off.
Yeah, I just, because there's nothing more nerve-wracking than having problems, and the gremlins show up at the worst possible time.
Right, it'll work 1,000 times in practice with no issues, and then you sit it down and you're like, where's that hum coming from?
Yeah, and the next thing you know, it's just all because of some little cable or just something. It's just the more shit you got to introduced into this chain, the more potential for problems there are, And, man, some of these places we played, it's dusty and it's hot and it's dirty and it's wet and it's just like
grounded properly.
Yeah, man, this stuff takes a beating, and it's like, there's a difference I've noticed between something that's intended for stationary use in your practice space versus something that's going to be bounced around in the back of a truck from here to Amarillo and back. There's just a difference in, pro level stuff or stuff that's really not intended to leave the house more than a few times a year, because some of that is just, it hits the pavement once and that's it.
So we got to talk about gear here for just a little bit, but so I'll ask you the same question I asked your compatriots. You get to shake the hand of one, your primary influence, or the influence that you feel like you want to do that with. Who you pick?
Oh man, that's tough. I always tell everybody. All this time I was teaching, I always taught everyone. I was like, look, I don't really care what you're into, but Jimi Hendrix was a pretty pivotal figure in just electric guitar. Whether it was rock or funk or reggae or blues or soul, the guy was he was a pivotal figure in the way people listened to music and thought about music and kind of like understood the guitar as an instrument. Before the guitar was sort of, one other piece in a big band, and we all know the story about Oklahoma City native Charlie Christian and pioneering the pickups to be able to be heard over the band and stuff, and but Hendrix really brought it to the forefront. Even maybe Chuck Berry, I guess he was kind of one of the first two. And there's all those guys back there in the dawn of rock that kind of set the cornerstones. Whether you play Jimmy Page or the Cult or the Cure or whatever you do, Hendrix you got a couple of lines right into the palm of Jimi Hendrix. And I think it'd be interesting to meet Jimi Hendrix. He's a cosmic character. But then again, I think Neil Young and I could get along real well, and he'd have a lot of stuff to tell me. It's hard to make those kind of calls, But I'd say it's just pivotal influence would be Hendrix. Just raw. He helped get the guitar where it is now.
So, speaking of pivotal influences, people talk in guitar, and there are a few important milestones. You mentioned a couple just there. Charlie Christian.
Yeah.
Before him, definitely Robert Johnson.
Mm-hmm.
After him, Les Paul.
Oh yeah, man, Les Paul.
And then we go to mentioned less often, but I feel equally important, Dick Dale.
Oh yeah.
And then maybe Chuck Berry in that same period, but definitely Jimmy.
Mm-hmm.
And then Eddie.
Definitely.
Do you feel like Eddie had as big of an impact as Jimmy? Because it's an argument that I feel like comes up a lot, and I fall to the side of people might have aped Eddie's style as much or more than Jimmy.
Yeah, Hendrix is hard to
But I don't know that Eddie had the same influence.
Not really. Eddie had a lot of that. It was what made him stand out was, of course, bringing tapping to the forefront, but also his kind of his innovations and de-innovations of gear. I read about the Marshall and the Variac, and just it's just every bad thing you could do to a piece of electronic equipment. He did it in the name of sounding like Eddie Van Halen instead of trying to be Eddie Van Halen trying to rip off such and such, trying to rip off such and such, And he did a lot of kind of wide stretch intervallic type ideas that really wasn't part of Hendrix necessarily. And Eddie will credit Alan Holdsworth for a lot of that, I think. The IOU album, that's supposedly where he got a lot of that. And I watched Alan Holdsworth one time up close at a guitar show, and man, just when you have those big fret stretches of guitar, it sounds different than just jacking around on a pentatonic scale like a good portion of people were doing. When Van Halen came out in '78, who was the king in '78? I'd say Jimmy Page was still reigning the crown of king then. I'd say Hendrix has always been there. But, you know, people making music in the late 70s, I mean, Van Halen was kind of like at the forefront. And